what Alabama did was wrong. He went the exact opposite way. And not only did he go the opposite way, he did almost 50 pages worth of dissent the opposite way. This headline right here, Clarence Thomas wrote a scathing, nearly 50-page dissent about why the Supreme Court should have gutted voting rights. The black man on the Supreme Court who comes from a generation who should especially understand how hard it was to get the right vote went not just the opposite way, he went there on a turbojet and absolutely proud of it. In his dissenting opinion, Thomas wrote that the court's decision has turned Section 2, the part of the Voting Rights Act that bans gerrymandering based on race, into, quote, nothing more than a racial entitlement to roughly proportional control of elective offices limited by feasibility, where different racial groups consistently prefer different candidates, in quote. I can't believe it, but yeah, the man did that. This reporting is coming from Business Insider. Now, it is hard to understand why Justice Thomas would contort himself, and I mean really contort himself, to be against ensuring that black voters are not disenfranchised. And he goes even further, saying the Voting Rights Act doesn't require Alabama intentionally redraw its long-standing congressional districts so that black voters can control. The man ain't even capitalized black. Black should be capitalized when you're talking about the people. But anyway, let me just keep on going. So that black voters can control a number of seats roughly proportional to the black share of the state's population. The man said the Voting Rights Act doesn't require that. That is coming from Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, I can't even pretend to be surprised, sisters and brothers and family and friends. I wish that I could, but I cannot. I was discussing with the mayor even before we got to this segment of how Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall did not want Justice Thomas to take his place. He made it very clear before he left this plane of existence that this man was not going to do justice for the things that he stood for as the first black person, black man on the United States Supreme Court. And what he predicted would happen is absolutely happening with Clarence Thomas. This headline here, July 2013, aptly describes this justice, Clarence Thomas, the anti-Thurgood Marshall. With his recent comparison of affirmative action to slavery, Justice Clarence Thomas appears determined to undo the civil rights and equal justice accomplishments of his predecessor, Justice Thurgood Marshall. And I know Justice Thurgood Marshall is probably rolling over in his grave right now, that this man is doing the things that he has done, not just in this moment, but in subsequent moments where it required courage and true justice to stand up for what is right. And this man went entirely the opposite direction. And this quote from Justice Thurgood Marshall, I think, is very fitting for this moment. I wish I could say that racism and prejudice were only distant memories. We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the fear, the hatred, and the mistrust. We must dissent because America can do better, because America has no choice but to do better. Some of the words from the great, the one and only Justice Thurgood Marshall. Mayor, as I said before, I wish I could feign that I'm surprised, but I am not surprised. This is Justice Clarence Thomas being exactly who he is.
Yeah, and unfortunately, who he is anti-black. This is a prime example of how you can look and exist in a black skin and be anti-black. The idea that you are against something as important as the voting right, which actually makes you a whole citizen, gives you a space and voice in democracy. And to show up in this manner is absolutely disgusting. And not just show up where you dissent, but you dissent with 50 pages of BS. 50 pages of BS that is not grounded in anything other than racism. I mean, like this, I'm a brother of the South. I'm from North Carolina. This guy and his family, he's Geechee like my people. And I am completely embarrassed. His family, you said Clarence, you said I'm sorry, brother.
Thurgood Marshall.
Thank you. Marshall is rolling over his grave. His mom and dad, who were sharecroppers, are rolling over in their grave that their son is on the nation's highest court, only to show up in a manner that disregard and disrespect their lived experiences. You cannot say that you are about or care about equity in this country, and you can't acknowledge that the systematic harm that this country does to black people. And every time Clarence Thomas write a 50-page decision against voting rights, and also the need for black people's voting right to be protected in states like Alabama or other southern states that historically blocked us from voting. And when I say blocking, don't think I'm talking about barricades. I'm thinking about nooses from trees with black bodies swinging from them. So for him to pretend that this is a small matter is absolutely disgusting. And it's his ancestors that's rolling over and really rolling.